I want you to move from overwhelmed by information to confident in what really matters. I want to help you move from being unsure towards direction and purpose in your healthcare. I want to introduce you to health experts. I want to let you in on tough conversations on women's health. I want to give you a place where you can lean in and learn how to take care of yourself. Let's transform your health. Let's get clear on your goals. This is Women's Health Unplugged. I'm your host, Dr. Jordan Robertson, naturopathic doctor. Welcome to another episode of Women's Health Unplugged. I am Dr. Jordan Robertson. I'm a naturopathic doctor in Ontario. And on the podcast today, I am being joined by a colleague of mine, Jenn Pike. Jenn is a nutritionist. She has an amazing online presence teaching women to tap into their cycle, which is something we've talked about a ton on the show about, and we're going to dive deep on that topic today. We're also going to talk a little bit about female entrepreneurs, which I love this topic because so many small businesses are owned by women. I will say so many small businesses and just businesses in general have suffered over the last year. And also, women have taken on additional responsibilities and burden over the last year with the COVID pandemic, whether they are homeschooling or now being primary caregivers for people that they were maybe not working with during the day, like their kids. I want to dive deep on this conversation. We're going to talk about burnout. We're going to talk about how to set some boundaries. I'm really excited about this conversation. Thanks so much for joining me, Jenn.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Jordan.
So I would love if you could because when we sort of reached out to have these conversations, and I've been on your podcast recently as well, we were kind of like volleying ideas back and forth around how we wanted to have this conversation for women. And these ideas came up around cycle syncing, which I know is something that you have a tremendous amount of expertise in, but also talking about our burned out female entrepreneurs. Can you just give us a bit of a backstory? Like, I'd love to hear how you got to where you are now as far as your knowledge and passion for supporting women.
Yeah, so it's been a while, which has been great because I've really been in the same industry, different limbs of it, for the past 24 years. And so I went to school originally, knowing I wanted to do something in health and fitness. And so I went, and that's what I studied was human physiology, biomechanics, came out as a medical exercise specialist, and I started to do a lot of rehab work. I worked mainly with athletes. Majority, like 90% of my clients that time were guys. And it was a lot of fun because, they had an entire team and community of trainers and chiros and nutritionists, and they were there to perform and to work hard. So there was a lot of creativity, a lot of fun in what was happening. At the same time that I was training and working with those guys, I was coming back home to Newmarket where I grew up, and I was part-time personal training working with all women. And there was such a huge, difference between, like, there was a massive contrast between these two populations that I was working with. And the more that I got connected to working with these women, I didn't have children at the time. I was like young in my early 20s, but I just kept taking these moments back and being like, wow, like, you have kids, you're working a full-time job, you're getting into the gym, you're doing this stuff for your body. This is like, you're actually the athletes of everyday life, let alone the ones that are, training and actually playing, a true sport. And so I just started to become enamored by working with these women. And I could feel something in me that was more drawn and connected to that. And so little by little, I started to decrease the amount of work I was doing with male athletes and start to work more with females. And so, that went on for years. I was teaching group exercise classes, doing that. I also went back to school in 2001 and became a holistic nutritionist at that point. I'm now a functional diagnostic nutritionist, which all that means is that now I run an array of different functional tests in order to help my clients understand what's going on a deeper level. And throughout all those years, the early years of training and teaching classes, I really was honestly driving to my paycheck. I was working at multiple gyms. I was the director for Sports Clubs of Canada for years downtown in Toronto. I was doing a lot of different things like that, mentoring. And then I became a mother myself. And that changed the game for me in terms of I was no longer driving to multiple locations. I couldn't. Being the trainer for a huge group of personal trainers was like, that was like mothering. And then I had my own actual children I had to mother. So I decided to open my own facility in my head, opening up my own space. That sounded more simplified. I actually called the studio Simplicity because that's what I was craving in my life. And so in 2010, I opened up a brick and mortar. And so we were a yoga and Pilates and boutique fitness space. And I also had a naturopath on staff. I had a homeopath, an osteopath. We had other clinicians that were in there. I had a team of 26. We were running classes. It was fantastic, but I was seriously burnt out. I had a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old at the time. And I was literally giving every ounce of my body, being, nervous system, you name it, to this business. And I would come home and my family would just get the leftover crappiest parts of me. I was exhausted. And I, did this and kind of went through these ups and downs for about 6 years. And then I decided to actually sell the business. I achieved what I had set out to do. I really wanted to create community and connection that was lacking in the town I was living in at the time. And we did that, and it was beautiful. But I could start to feel that I was ready to expand my wings and to do some other things. And it's hard if you have a brick and mortar space. It's at the time when I was doing it, I mean, it's very different now. I really feel for small businesses, but back then I couldn't leave that space and do what I was doing. And so I made that decision. I didn't realize in the couple of years after I sold it and I transitioned everything online, just how tired and burnt out I actually was. I was saying to you before we hit record, it's like I was going back through postpartum again, which kind of makes sense because when you open up a business, like that was my third baby. And so I went through all the growing pains and, all of that. And anyways, now here we are 6 years later from that transition. My entire company is fully virtual and online based. I'm the founder of the Hormone Project, which has been, my main passion project for the last 5 years, which is an educational platform and program that really teaches women what I believe we should have been taught and known about our bodies from a very young age as young girls. And so that has been fantastic. And then I have Synced, which is a cycle syncing and cycle awareness based program for women. And it's all around movement. So my background as a certified strength and conditioning coach and trainer and teaching, like I am obsessed with the human body. I love exercise and movement. And for years, I was watching women in the gym just always do cardio and be so afraid to pick up the weights. And, that was going to make them bulky and that wasn't going to help them achieve their results. And I spent so much time trying to teach them the opposite of that and to really embrace lifting and what it could do, for not only their metabolic system, but this longevity organ that is our muscle. And I just fell in love with it. And so with Synced, I was starting to teach women how they could use their cycle, whether it's their menstrual cycle or tapping into the lunar energy and the moon cycle, to really create a balanced approach for their body so that they weren't showing up and training to like maximum intensity 7 days a week. And yeah, and so this is, and now here we are. I'm 41. I started teaching my first class when I was 17.
That's amazing. That's such a cool story. And I love that, like, at the very beginning, you had this kind of like dichotomy of watching the male athletes
Mhm.
versus the women. As having a conversation with another practitioner the other day, and I said, I don't work with men very often, but it's funny when I do because you just give them a list of like 10 things to do and they take it home and they do them and then they come back and they did
Yeah.
it. Right. And so often I'm like,
Yeah.
how'd you do with the things that I said? And the male patients are like, well, what do you mean? Like, I just did the things you asked me to do, Jordan. Whereas for women, it's not that simple of an answer. And this other practitioner I
No.
was talking with, she was like, well, Jordan, they have such an easy time putting themselves first. And so we give women a task list of 10
Mhm.
things to do. And she has to take that home to the context of her life and the way she thinks about herself and her self-limiting beliefs and all those automatic thoughts, and then the other
Yeah.
responsibilities she has, and she accomplishes 2 of them. And I just thought that's interesting because I literally was just having this conversation with someone yesterday, and for you to bring that up, like the difference between them. Is that what your experience was like, or could you see more similarities between the men and women you worked with?
Oh no, it was very different. It was like, it's exactly what you said. You told it to them and they were like, okay, boom, go through it, non-attached. Like there was no emotional attachment. There was nothing else to consider. It was just like, okay, this is the task. I'm a taskmaster. I'm going to get it done. As where with the women, emotion came right into it. Everybody else came right into it. Okay, I know you're asking me to do this, but I've got so-and-so that won't eat this or won't do that. And I've got to check in with my partner, or I've got, and I've got to run the kids here. And her whole life, it was just like, I could see her entire day in her calendar, literally unloading in front of me in response. So it was different. When I was simultaneously working with the men and the women, I could give them literally a plan laid out point by point, exactly what to do. And like you said, slide it over, it would get it done. With women, I had to chunk it down. It was like, here's step one. Let's do that until this is a pattern and it's manageable. How does that feel? And that was the difference too. With guys, it was never feel. It was just like, think, do. And with women, it was completely different. And when I started to understand more about the actual physiology of our makeup as women, for men, they're living in a testosterone prone world 24/7. It literally is Groundhog Day on a hormonal level. So they're like primed for that, like cognitively, neurolinguistically, all of it. For us as women, we have moments where we have that clarity and that focus and the ability to really profit off the increase in that testosterone with estrogen right there alongside it. That's like our shiny time. For most women, that's that follicular phase leading into ovulation. But you try and give the same woman the exact same instructions, the couple of days of the week leading into her menstrual cycle. And depending on how she's feeling and what's going on, she may not be able to even accept hearing the information, let alone be able to do any of the things.
Yeah, there's some cool studies on that, like depending on where we give nutritional information to women in their menstrual cycle predicts their dropout rate of the plan.
Yep.
And if we give women the
Yep.
instructions in their follicular phase, they're more likely to start and they're more likely to continue because they maybe get
Yep.
7, 8, 10 days under their belt before they hit PMS. Whereas if we give women those same
Yep.
instructions during their PMS phase, the dropout rate is higher and their ability to like continue is actually lower because they can't make it
Yep.
through that full, like they're in that time, like just like you're saying, where there's just too
Mhm.
much for them to be able to take on that plan, and then they end up self-sabotaging and not being able to carry on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I'll oftentimes when I'm working with women, if I'm working with them at a time where they are in that luteal phase, especially if it's tail end, which is typically for most women about, that it can be 10 to 14 days depending, but most women sitting somewhere about 5 to 7 days out from their cycle, that's when they'll say things like, I become a different person. It's really where I feel my mood, my body, like other people around me start to notice it. I will actually, instead of giving her things to go to do, I will just say, I really want you to pay attention and focus on these next few days. How are you feeling? Like, how are you feeling? Are you feeling satisfied from the food that you're choosing? Are you feeling achy? Do you notice headaches? What's going on with your sleep? So I'm trying to help her build her awareness before I jump in and tell her things. I want her to start to establish this kind of base foundation of like, this is actually what I noticed. This is what I wrote down. This is what I connected to. Support her moving through her actual menses, her bleed week. And then as she's coming into that follicular phase, it's like, okay, now we can start to implement.
And it's so interesting because so many health plans are focused on that like do kind of mindset, right? Where
Mhm.
women feel
Mhm.
like they're not, that the health plan isn't worth it if they're not having like a checklist of 1,000 things. Cause I think that's what they're like used to consuming. And so occasionally when I'm
Yes.
working with women, I'm like, okay, I want you to do this and eat some more protein. And they're like, yeah, but what else? Right? Like, what do you
Right.
want me to, what do you want me to take out? And what about this and what about that and what are the special vegetables I need to eat? And it's like, no, 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 the plan is like way simpler than that. But it speaks
Hmm.
volumes to the kind of information women usually consume online, which can make them feel like they're failing because it is always about like women look like they have it all together online.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard, even like the programs that I run, there's a group component of it, and then there is individual coaching that happens inside of it. And what can be the challenging part is that when you're delivering group information, you're not talking to any one individual, but the individual listening will feel like you are talking exactly to them. And so what can happen is if you give, a half a dozen or X amount of different possible scenarios, depending on the person on the receiving end, they might hear every single one of those as I need to do that, and I need to do that, and I need to, and now they become super overwhelmed, as opposed to this is what's going to work for me. So that comparison trap of where we get up and we hop onto Instagram or we go into the group, and now we start to see the woman who's maybe in that follicular phase. So she's like, having a really awesome period of time, and she's sharing her food pictures and how great she's feeling and that she did all the things. To another woman, they might feel like crap, like they have failed, and now try to overcompensate by doing more, because that's a reflection to her as what she's not doing right.
And I think we see this in female entrepreneurs too, like especially in the health space. I can definitely see that there's that big
Mhm.
comparison trap. We all follow each other online, right? You can see all the wonderful big things that people are doing, and I'm sure it's the same in other industries, that like the vast majority of
Yeah,
your news feed are I'm going to say competitors in air quotes because I don't really believe in
right.
that, but that the other people that are like you feel like you're supposed to be comparing yourself against, that like female entrepreneur like logs into Instagram in the morning and is overcome with
Mhm.
comparison.
Yeah. And it's really difficult. And that is, we've been talking up to this point, working with females, like from a client perspective, but when we're talking about entrepreneurs, we're very much hardwired in the same way. For us, though, depending on how you're putting it into place. So some entrepreneurs I work with, they're simultaneously on their own health journey, and they're trying to build, what they would call an empire, this like really strong business. And there's a lot of moving pieces to building a business and running a company. And when you're doing it online, there's a whole tech side of it, there's operations, there's your financial side of it, there's your team support, there's onboarding, there's customer fulfillment, there's so many different things that are going on. You're always in that high level learning space. Even when you have the team in place, you still, like, if it's your company and business, it's you still have to be in that mindset. And so what we can tend to do is, maybe we've nailed it, what we consider to be nailing it over in our health and our wellness. But now we've just taken all the same things of like overcompensating, hustling, grinding, forcing, pushing, fitting ourselves into this box in the business. And everything we see our other colleagues or other people doing, we're like, oh, I got to do that. Oh, that's a good idea. Oh, she has this coming out. I got to get something out like that too. And it's like that part of the reticular activating system where, you might never notice the kind of car that you have on the road, but the one day you connect to the fact that you drive like a white, Toyota RAV4, you are going to start to see that car everywhere. And the same thing will happen online, is when you start to pick something up and there's that part of your brain that connects to a certain need, like I need to be doing that, or I should be doing that. I guarantee now you're going to be so hyper focused, all you're going to see is what everyone else is doing. And that is just going to compound what you feel like you're not doing.
Not to mention that targeting ads also now know what we think we should be doing.
Yeah.
On top of that, then you're getting
Yeah.
an ad for some kind of like slimming program or some kind of ad for some sort of like social media, management system. And
Hmm.
it's reinforcing all of that, that like there's more that you need to do. I'm actually really
Yeah.
curious what other people's targeted ads look like, because all of mine are about how to grow my practice. Right. Every single targeted ad I get is like,
Mhm.
you need this furniture, you need this system, you need to hire this management company. I really want to know what everybody else's targeted ads look like, because it's speaking to like my own insecurities, right? About, do I need to get help with
Wow.
this? Do I need to replace the table that we
Yeah.
have in the kitchen at the clinic?
Yeah. I find, and this is what makes it scary, and this is the reality of where things are going. I find it's whatever I'm talking about out loud. That, like, my husband and I'll go for a walk. Sometimes we don't even take our phones, Jordan, and I come back, and when I go on my phone, it's all, and I'm like, how in the heck does that happen? But it's because these things around us are always listening. And also when we are doing things like targeted ads, I mean, it's actually frightening what you can go in and target down to, like, the level of minute detail of the individual. And so I think it's important for listeners to understand that too. There's no like irony in what's popping up and then how you're feeling. It's all there by design. And that is to feed on the parts of you and honestly create a bit of a trauma response so that you now act, you now purchase, you swipe up, you do something. And how many of us get into that place where we do it and then we're like remorseful? Like we do it and then we're like, oh, like, did I really need that? Like, how many more of these do I need to have? Or how many more programs can sit in my listen to later folder?
Right. But it's such a like, it just feeds back to that idea that you're not doing enough, right? Because not only are you
Yeah.
seeing all your friends look like they have it all together, it also looks
Yeah.
like all the people you admire online have their shit together. And then on top of that, the targeted ads are trying to sell you things to make you feel like you have your shit together.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Right. And we were talking about this before we went live. It's like what I see, and this isn't even just what I see, it's also what I feel. What I feel in my own body and in my own life as an entrepreneur, a woman, a mother, a wife, a human being, all of the things is what's really impacting us day to day, whether it's in running our business or in our own health or our nervous system or however we show up. It's the things we're not saying. It's the things that we're not, talking about. And it is, I always say to people, like, listen really hard to what's being held in the pause, right? Like what's not coming through. But when you're conversing with someone and you're like, I can just feel like there's more there. There's something underneath that. I feel like if there was a shift where more people were talking about those types of things, that it would allow us to, okay, receive the ad coming in, see the notification, whatever it is, but then step back and ask ourselves, is this in alignment with me? Like, does this really do I really need this right now versus that like scarcity feeling and I got to jump on and take advantage right now or I'm not going to be successful.
Yeah, it's interesting because the other thing we were saying, like right before we hopped on or pressed record, was the idea of like just going to work sometimes is probably not the worst thing. And I think that that goes for both our women who are on a health journey, but also looking at our women entrepreneurs or women who are pursuing greatness, whatever that
Mhm.
is that there is that like that feeling like there needs to be a continual drive forward, which is like
Yeah.
diametrically opposed to female physiology, where half the month we maybe shouldn't be driving forward, or maybe
Mhm.
how hard we drive forward in the first half of the month is actually worsening how we feel in the second half of the month. But
Yep.
there is this like continuous drive forward. And sometimes when I present patients with the concept that their greatest goal in this moment would just to be consistent, right? Because
Mhm.
it's like, well, what's next? Like, well, what do we do now?
Mhm.
Well, now
Mhm.
I've mastered this, Jordan. What do we do now? And I'm like, you repeat it
Yeah.
over and over and over again for like 90 more days. And
Yeah.
I've said this to like practitioners too, that people will call me and say, well, Jordan, should I start a podcast? Should I do this? Right? I see everyone's doing this. And I'm like, why don't you just go to work?
Yeah.
Right? Like what's the worst that would happen if you just like autopiloted a little bit
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
just like it had joy and had a walk and like had
Mhm.
all of that space created for you by not driving the needle forward all the time. Like what do you think?
Well, I think there's a couple of things within that. I think that for those of us that are entrepreneurs, there's something that is hardwired in us to create and to deliver and to desire and to crave more. I think there's something in us innately. A friend of ours, Megan Walker, when I was on her podcast, we had this conversation. She was asking, do you believe entrepreneurs are born this way or that they can be, created? I think there's something within us that has us, going for this driving force. And so, but here's the thing is that at the end of the day, if your goal is to have a successful company, there's like equal amounts of energy of how much you're working in your business and how much you're working on your business. But where's the other side of that quotient, that ratio where there's the rest? Like what I suffered from so many years, and I still have to very, very awarely and intentionally catch myself on this. Create it, launch it, successful with it. What can I do next? Instead of creating it, launching it, massaging it, celebrating it, taking the fertile void, pulling back, allowing it to just be, enjoy it. And then, okay, like, do I feel like getting back up and moving into that energy? And it's a constant, recorrection because my brain up here, that part of Jen that is like, the achiever and the creator and has so many ideas, I have to like constantly reel her back in and be like, hey, this is your nervous system talking. That's awesome if you want to do those things, but just so you know, you're going to implode yourself. And then that husband of yours you want to hang out and spend time with, you're not going to be able to do it the same way. The patient mom that you want to be, like it's not going to be able to happen. But it's a conversation that, 20 some odd years into my practice, I still have to have with myself. And I think that's an important thing for people to hear is you see someone that's achieving a certain thing, and then you say to you create the perception, not them. You create the perception. They've nailed it. They've got it all figured out. They never have a bad day. They're killing it. That's your perception. That's not the reality, I can promise you. It doesn't matter what someone's Instagram feed looks like. Legit, that's the highlight reel. That is not what's going on behind the scenes. And so I think that when we can approach that, and very much for me, Jordan, over these last few years, especially since doing so much more work with Synced, I really try to schedule my calendar based around the times of the month where I know in my body, I am going to feel my best. I know the few days coming into my cycle, I am never launching anything. I'm not recording something like this. I'm not going to jam pack my day in practice. I'm not going to film because that is out of integrity and out of alignment with what's best for me. But that takes years and it takes practice.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think sometimes we forget is that there is like a lot of elapsed time between the time we watch people, I'll go with your word, launching, which we talk about this in the online space all the time when you're launching a thing, right? But
Yeah.
whatever it is, whether it's someone getting married or someone losing 10 pounds or whatever that metric is you're following someone in, we forget that there's a lot of elapsed time and circumstances that led that person to achieve those goals.
Mm-hmm.
We look at it in the context of like our life and we go like, well, shit, in the last month, I didn't record an album. Thanks a lot, Taylor Swift. Right? Rather than realizing that like their life, their circumstances, their back work that they've done on that project probably existed for a long time before you got insight into the highlight. And I think you're right. Like when you say, like, what's in those pause, like what's in the pauses between what people are saying, that's what we're not hearing. We're not hearing the
Yeah.
80-hour work weeks, the sitting alone
Yeah.
in my office with the lights off, crying with a pizza that a friend brought me because I had to stay late and mop up all of the crap that was happening. We don't talk about or see those moments.
Yeah.
You see the great practice, helping people get pregnant, all the things that we do, but we're not having those conversations about, well, what does it take, right, to get there, and how much
And
sacrifice was there.
100%. And I think part of it, like, and again, I'm just going to speak for myself. I don't know how it feels for everyone else, but I go through these in and outs where, people will message and say things like, you're so real. And it triggers me for some reason because I'm like, what the hell else would I be? I don't have energy or the time to come on here and be a fake version on here. And then, put a different hat on and be a different type of Jen over here. And yet at the same time, I say we're not talking about these things, but I'm going to be honest, I don't want to come on and, press record on my stories or do an IGTV when I'm in those shitty moments and I'm feeling like crap and I'm crying and I just need to introvert and be on my own. And the fact that we even have to say that, it's like, I also don't have to do that. And that's the other side, the negative side of Instagram is it's like the people that choose to follow, it's like there's sometimes this level of ownership where it's like, well, no, because I want you to. And if I like this part that you're sharing, right, then I need you to show all of it in your life so that I can feel better. And I'm always like, I will hand that right back to you because that is not my responsibility. It's just understanding as a whole. Here's the thing, we're all human beings. And I don't know a single woman or a mother who right now, especially in the last 15 months, has not strapped on 5 additional backpacks of invisible weight and responsibility and stress and worry and uncertainty, because how many flipping decisions can we be asked to make in a day when we don't always know the appropriate, and we're all just doing the best that we can. No matter, what side of the fence or what we're talking about in anything, all of us, I believe, show up every day in our life and are literally trying to do the best that we can. And I think if we can get to a place where we celebrate that and we give compassion to the women that we're witnessing for that, all of a sudden now that energy around needing to compete with her or be like her or ask more from her, it starts to drop.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think we need to leave on the table.
Right, because we don't need to necessarily see everybody's bad days, right? I think you're right that more it's like a reflection on. So when you see that person's highlight and it's triggering for you,
Mhm.
that's the place to look, right? That like,
Yeah.
are we deeply happy for that colleague who hits a milestone at work? Are we
Mhm.
deeply happy for our friend who, you know, loses 10 pounds or whatever the goal was? Or is it inside of you triggering this idea that like, I either A, I'm not good enough, or I need to do
Yeah.
more, or that's not fair. Like I think that's, where we need to like shed the light on the conversation, which I
Yeah.
think the conversation around social media is getting better.
For
But you're
sure.
right, there is that sense that like, and funnily, if people track back through my social media, I barely post in my luteal phase at all.
Mm.
Or I repost stuff from the
Yeah.
past. And
Yeah.
because it's like, I don't really have it in me. I don't have the
Yep.
creative juices. I'm not super interested in it. I'll just show
Yep.
you some stuff that I wrote a while ago. But it looks like on this, and that's just a strategy I have to continue to show up for the
Exactly.
community. That's not me hiding that I don't feel well. That's not me
Yeah.
pretending that I feel great. It's just a strategy. And there are other
But that's
strategies.
smart. And here's the thing. Yeah, but here's the thing, as a female entrepreneur, that's a wise strategy. We do the same thing behind the scenes. I have a social media assistant who is helping me to pre-schedule things out. And there are certain weeks where I'm like, just so you know, these aren't the weeks where I'm going to show up on my stories. I'm not going to be, because I know I won't have it in me. And that's where we have stuff that's batched or whatever it is, or like you said, you repurpose. But that's really smart and really kind to you versus feeling like, oh my God, I'm just going to, suppress how I'm feeling because I got to show up.
Mhm, mhm. And I think there's other examples of that in women who maybe their business is not on Instagram, right? Like, but I do think that
Right.
there are strategies there, and I would love to hear what you teach in your course for women, like how to manage that luteal phase, because I think that's where people have the greatest challenge, right? They're like, no problem, follicular phase, and for me with the follicular phase, I'm always trying to
Yeah.
get women to rein it in, because just because you feel invincible doesn't mean you should do all the things,
Yeah.
because then we know that's a predictor for how horrible we feel in our luteal phase. It shouldn't be this chronic, like, do all
Yeah.
the things and then burn out for 2 weeks. But the strategies during the luteal phase, like, I'm
Yeah.
curious what other solutions you have for women, or what your suggestions are there.
So I think this brings up a good point in that we've been talking a lot about the digital online space. And, for a lot of people, they're still working their, corporate job or their regular job. Some are still going into work. Others are, they're doing this, but it's 9 to 5 all day long. And so I'm going to say the most important thing I think that we can do for ourselves in the beginning is really start to focus on getting our blood sugar stable. So a lot of women I know and that I'm working with, they're not eating enough. They're not nourishing their body on that foundational level. And I think that, two things: are you hydrated enough? Are you getting enough water in, which is free and simple? Are you eating often enough throughout the day? And do you feel that your blood sugar is balanced, meaning you're not swinging from having a headache and dizzy and lightheaded or cranky and like, oh my gosh, I got to eat something now, quick on the go, that little bit of preparation, or having just convenient, quick things that are at home that are ready for you to go, that I think can make a massive difference. There is direct correlation in your blood sugar levels and support to your adrenal levels and support to your thyroid. This whole system is communicating with your ovaries and on a neurological level as well too. In order for us to step out of the brain fog, to feel a little bit more supported and crisp, if you don't have stable blood sugar, that's going to be really difficult. So in the beginning, helping her, like, what do you know? Okay, like for instance, if you know in the morning it's just a gong show trying to get everything organized, that needs to be something that's quick and convenient. Could it be something simple like a smoothie? Could it be something that you made the night before that you're going to have as a leftover? I don't know necessarily who the woman is that we're specifically talking about, but it could even be like a quick handful of nuts if that's what she can get in, but something to help to support and deliver that to her system. And then eating often enough throughout the day. So if she knows that, no, like I'm in meetings from 12 till 5, you need something coming through a straw. You need something. If you can't change that schedule for yourself, you need to have, like, I call it ammunition. Like, I keep doing this because I'm at my desk. I always have, like, if you saw my desk at the end of the day, like the water bottles on here, the snacks, the bowls, like all of the things, because if I'm not primed in that way, I know I'm not going to be able to show up the best. The other thing is, depending on what she has going on in her life, like can you, if prepping or batching anything ahead of time on the weekend isn't possible, could you possibly like get some pre-made meals that you could have on hand, or like a service, those types of things? So obviously understanding a little bit more about her. The other thing I'm going to say on that is sleep. The sleep and the rest part is massive. So I would say that it is in the top 1, 2, 3 complaints of women who I work with, where they are not sleeping, or they fall asleep no problem because they are done. And then they're waking multiple times throughout the night and cannot get back to sleep. Before I'm going to recommend any type of supplement or test or anything, I'm going to ask bigger questions and be like, tell me about the day that you're living before you're actually laying down and going to bed at night. And 9 times out of 10, it is that she's over caffeinated, underfed. She's starving when it comes to the evening. And, and then if she's putting a glass of wine in there or whatever it may be, because that's how she's trying to calm down, those types of things could actually show up with unstable blood sugar in the middle of the night. And so all helped her to work on those things first to get her some better rest. Breaks, like when you have the breaks, honestly, it could be walk outside. It could also be lie on the floor. Like there are days where I have great intentions of moving my body for like exercise, but I literally will just slide off my chair onto the ground and just lie there and breathe and ground myself and get back to it. So I think there's a lot of things that we can look at. I always like to start with low-hanging fruit and free first. Water is free. Walking outside is free. Lying on the ground is free. Getting to bed early is free. What kind of food do you have in your home? Let's work with that first. How can we couple this? How can we get you nourished throughout the day? And that's really the base. And then we would build from there.
Those are such like great practical solutions. I think too, like one thing you mentioned there, and I wrote down a few things while you were talking, like, like part of it is just about noticing what's going on. So it's interesting. I just started working with a new trainer at home because I just was suffering, not being able to figure out how to exercise. And so I needed to hire someone to tell me what to do. And we went through my day. He's like, walk me through your day, Jordan. Like what kind of, just like you asked, like what's the day that you're living? And I was like, okay, I get up between 5:30 and 6:30. Sometimes I'll sleep till 7. When I get up, I have a cup of black coffee. Da, 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 da. I walked him through like my whole day, all the food, all the breaks, all the things. And then I got to the end and I was like, is that enough? Like detail? And he was like, Jordan, nobody knows what they're doing. Like people will respond like, well, I get up and then, I like have breakfast, but I'm not sure. Could be this, it could be this. And then there's work and then there's lunch, but like have no idea what happens for like these long portions of the day. Right. And I think when we work in health and wellness, we have this this sense that we actually need to like notice what's going on in order for us to find solutions. And if you have these like 6-hour gaps of the day that you don't know what happens, I'll bet you your blood sugar is low by the end of it. Right.
Yeah.
Like you can't just have these gaps that are like, oh yeah, and then I worked for 9 hours.
Yeah.
Like it has to be more intentional than that.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I've seen, and I don't know if you see this in your practice or not, but definitely this has been a trend in the last while. It is women that are, I say this, they're abusing the intermittent fasting and they're going way too long. They're shortening the window and then they're also dieting within the windows that they're eating. And it's really fascinating because when I'll talk to clients, and there's a lot of my corporate ladies that I'm working with, and I'll say, okay, like, how would it feel to actually eat food in the morning, like to choose something instead of waiting until 11, 12, 1 o'clock, like some of them are doing. And they're not doing it on water in the morning. They're doing it by having more and more upgraded coffees, right? Just stretching it out because it's an appetite suppressant and it keeps them going. And I'm not against coffee at all. Have your coffee, but can we please start to put some food in your body? And some of them will actually cry when I ask the question, how would it feel to eat in the morning? Because they're terrified, because they're already not feeling well. They're already feeling inflamed. They're already maybe having difficulty with their weight. And the idea of actually putting food into them scares them because they're so fixed inside of these eating windows of what they're supposed to be doing. And a lot of them I find are following what has been prescribed for men, like a 12 to 8 eating window, and then fasting from 8 until noon. I can tell you, not only doing the functional tests and talking to women, that is not our prime window as females to be doing this. We actually do better eating earlier in the day really supporting and nourishing our system. And if anything, having kind of that time restricted window a little bit earlier in the evening. And so when we start to actually get them eating, within a week, they'll message and be like, oh my gosh, I can't tell you how much has changed. My digestion is better. I'm pooping earlier in the day. My mood is better. Like my workouts are better. I'm lifting better. My recovery is better. And I think it's such a simple shift when we talk about it, like, logistically, of changing the timing of when we're eating. But for some people, it can be a big mental block.
Yeah, it's like you mentioned earlier, that difference between like what I should be doing versus how I actually feel doing it.
Yes. Yeah.
That's where that disconnect is, right? Because they'll read, oh, if intermittent fasting is good, I
Yes.
guess I should do that. And then be friggin'
Yeah.
exhausted at 12:30 while they're waiting for their 1 p.m.
Yeah.
meal and not be able to make that connection with like the rules that I've set for myself. And I think we can, like, that's a micro version of that macro.
Yeah.
Oh, I should be doing this on social media. Oh, I should be doing this in
Yes.
my workplace. Oh, I should be driving forward versus like looking at like, how do I feel when I own this business? How do I feel when I say yes
Yeah.
to all these responsibilities and obligations? How do I feel when I don't delegate work away that I very easily could have someone else do for me? It's the same
Yeah,
idea,
absolutely.
right? It's like that not
Yeah.
reflecting back. It's just I'm doing it because I think I'm supposed to. And women feel like they should just be tough enough to
Yeah.
persevere.
Well, and it's, I don't know what it is, but as women, like we feel like there always has to be rules. Tell me what to do, paint me the rule box, and then I'll slide into the rule box. And we're so afraid to mess it up, or to go against the grain, or not do it how we think it's right. And I'll even see this even with like cycle syncing and teaching about cyclical living, is that, and exercise is a good example of this. You are supposed to, in your follicular and ovulatory phase, be at this peak with your estrogen and testosterone, which would prime you and your tendons and ligaments for stability and strength to go heavier, fewer repetitions, to really maximize this. Coming into your ovulatory, this is where you could do more explosive. This is where you're hit. Your harder wads could find you. But then if I have a woman who's like, I'm trying to do the harder ones because I know I'm supposed to, but I got to tell you, leading into ovulation, I don't actually feel good. My energy is really low. My breasts are really tender. I feel achy. Well, here's the thing. Your body trumps all of that. So just because the formula suggests, you got to come back and ask how does it feel in your body today? Does that connect with you and feel appropriate, or do you need to decrease those intensities? But again, it comes back to almost like a lot of women need the permission. Okay, I'm allowed to do that. Okay, I wasn't sure.
Like they don't trust
Yeah.
themselves, right? Do you feel like that's related to our difficulties with boundaries? Because as you're saying that, I'm seeing, like, it makes me think of that exactly. And one of the pieces that I wanted to touch on just before we wrap up for the day was around like how you establish healthy boundaries. I would love for you to share, if you're comfortable with that, because I think that's such a secret sauce,
Mm,
right, for healthy and successful female
yeah.
entrepreneurs is their boundary setting. But I see it being almost one and the same, right? It's like if you read something that told you to do something and it didn't feel good, is it our lack of boundaries, like being able to say, like, no, that doesn't work for me, actually, right? And being assertive and trusting ourselves enough to say, I'm too hungry to fast that long, or I don't feel like doing a hit workout when I'm
Yeah.
bloated. What do you think?
I think 100% they're connected. And, for me, there's always been I've called it different things over my life, but for as long as I can remember, like my parents laugh and are like, you literally walked out of the womb asking questions. And, it's like, I've never been the one where, because I was told to, that I was just like, okay, I'll do it. Why? Well, why? But I don't feel like that, or this doesn't feel that way in my body. And, for me, I just had experiences from a very young age. I modeled for a long time. I traveled a lot around the world. I was one of the only girls in my agency that didn't have an eating disorder. And I would and there were times I tried. I would try to go a day without eating. And then I'd be like, this feels horrible. Like I can't do it. I don't care that I'm not going to get that job. I can't do this. And so those were some of the early things about being very clear about my boundaries. Also, when I owned my brick and mortar business, I lost every flipping boundary that ever existed because I wanted to be liked so badly. I wanted my business to succeed. I wanted everyone to feel like they were just getting the best service and that we were, just the best company and that they were our number one priority. And so I gave everything to that, and I lost myself for a lot of years in that. That's what the exhaustion was. It wasn't running the company. I lost every boundary and every ounce of the woman that I was in the thing that I was loving the most at the time. And I say it in that way on purpose because if you asked me in the moments, nothing made me happier than sitting in the front of that studio to a jam-packed room. Nothing made me happier than all these women coming in and not wanting to leave. But at the same time, the way I was doing it, I was sacrificing myself. And so when I stepped out, the exhaustion was needing to honestly cleanse myself of that and reestablish the boundaries. And now it is my MO of life. I can get pulled and persuaded into lots of shiny object things, but I will always come back and sit with it and be like, what does it feel like? And I literally, I'm touching my chest right now. I need to come back. For me, it's a visceral response. And if something feels off in my body, it's a no. It's a no, thank you. And when it feels like I get the goosebumps and everything is right, so my body has become the cue for the boundaries. And as women, you possess this innate wisdom and ability to tap into your intuition. It is like you all have it in you. You just don't listen. You second guess her. You shove her down. You let someone else tell you, no, that's not true and that's not right. And it's scary in the beginning when you start to hear that voice and you begin to live and act from it. But fuck, is it empowering. It is like the best thing ever. And when you do it in one area of your life, it becomes contagious and you strengthen it just like the muscles that we're talking about.
That's such good advice, Jen. It makes me think of often when women are moving from being very passive or not having good boundaries towards being more assertive with what their needs are,
Yeah.
they feel really aggressive,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that shift from, can I have a shower and you watch the baby, to, I'm going to have a shower, feels like they're like, oh God, I could never say it that
Yeah.
way. Right. And when they hear other women say things that way, especially if that feels uncomfortable for them, that's where we start to label each other with those maybe not so friendly names, right? Because it's like, well, I
Yeah.
couldn't just demand that I wanted a shower, and look at her getting a shower when she wants one. She must,
Yeah.
she's a bitch, right? What a bitch for getting
Right.
her
Yeah,
shower, or whatever
exactly.
the equivalent
Yep.
is. But really, what that's
Yep.
showing us is that, and then there's lots of great examples of this. I've seen these memes where it's like the woman that you see walking down the street who looks so confident, the reason she's triggering you is because you kind of want to be her, right? Or you would love to know the secret
Yeah.
sauce for how she got to that place where she could say, I'm done work at 3:30.
Yeah.
That's just how it goes. And I'm sorry that you can't come before 3:30, but that's when I'm done. Right. And I'm happy
Yeah.
to hold space for you before that moment. But when 3:30 comes around, that's it. And it
Yep.
took me a long time to get to that place too, where I was able to say, I'm sorry if that's disappointing you, but if I break that, I'm just disappointing myself. And
Yeah.
no one wants to work with a woman who's just chronically disappointing herself, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Like everything you said. Yeah, exactly. It's interesting, you had asked me before we were going into this about, something online that I see that annoys me where it's around women, right? That is portrayed out there. And for me, it's the meme of the woman in the 3-piece office suit and a pencil skirt. And she's juggling the baby and has the coffee mug in one hand and then the briefcase and the pencil in her teeth, and the hair that's all out of place. And it's super mom. And it's what the fuck? First of all, who wears a pencil skirt nowadays that's doing all that's great if
Doesn't
you
she know
can.
how uncomfortable that is?
Right? There are elastic waist pants. They're amazing. You should wear a pair, and I just think about myself and it's that that is so unrelatable to what most of us not only are doing, but even what we want to
Want.
do.
Yes.
I don't want that. I want to be able to do what I love every day, inspire women, work with them, build a team, work alongside them. And then I want to be able to enjoy my family, because what are we doing all of this for if we have nothing left in us at the end of the day? Not to give back to our community necessarily, but literally just to live this life that we're trying to create for ourselves.
I love it. Exactly. Jenn, as we kind of wrap up, I would love, can you just walk me through or your last sort of final thoughts for our listeners and how we can get in touch with you? Because I think the offerings that you have online are so relevant for women who are starting to have this we talk about cycle syncing in various forms on the podcast all the time, right? Because we're talking about how women feel with respect to their hormones. How can our listeners get in touch with you? But also, I want you to sort of give us that one liner around what your big message is. Like, where do you see yourself going over the next few years? And what's your big take home message for women?
Well, I'll start with the easiest, which is where to reach me. So, Instagram, Jenn with two N's, Pike, and my website, jennpike.com. And I do actually have a free downloadable ebook about cycle syncing, which is like very baseline intro. So it's not overwhelming. If someone's like, I've never even heard of these concepts, that's a great place to start. I also have a podcast myself, the Simplicity Sessions, that you've been on, and we do quite a few episodes about the different phases of our cycles. In terms of, for me, what I'm most excited about, it's the stepping back from a lot of the practitioner-based work that I've been doing as a practitioner and stepping more fully into the role of coaching the women in our programs, coaching other practitioners. I have a mentorship I started this year out of just a need from my heart and my soul called The Audacious Woman. And I'm working with a small group of women supporting the woman that they are, not supporting the business, their body weight, any of those things, but literally like who makes up who they are and how they're moving through their life. And I'm just obsessed with it and I'm loving it. And, for me, my goal at the end of the day, Jordan, it is to impart equal amounts of education and inspiration into every woman that I come in contact with, and to have them know that this is your innate not only gift, but you deserve the information. You deserve to know. You deserve to understand your body, all of her beautiful languaging, and to feel confident and empowered in this gift that we have been given. And it doesn't have to be arduous. You can do this with more simplicity and more ease. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I think a lot of us have to be open to unlearning what we think we know, and then just take it one step at a time. I was asked last week in an interview, how long would you say to people that they need to be on their journey for? And I answered it with a question, which is, well, how long do you want to live for? Because in my opinion, the health journey ends when our life ends. And so if you want to live a long, juicy life, wake up every day and just ask yourself, what can I do to feel good today? That's it.
Mhm. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing. I think that we had so many good moments in there. I'm excited to go back and listen to this episode because I think, talking about cycle syncing, we're talking about women learning to trust themselves, but then that concept of what are your goals and why are you getting so easily swayed based on what everybody else is doing?
Mhm.
Like, what does good boundary setting look
Yeah.
like? What does planning and infrastructure look like for you? You made that great comment about just buy some pre-made salads, right? It doesn't make you a bad
Yeah.
person that
Yeah.
a couple days out of the month you need food to arrive in your lap, right? There's nothing wrong
Yep.
with that. And if that helps you navigate your PMS window for a few months while we get your feet under you, let's just lean into that. I think those are great strategies.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful to have you on the show and for us to have this conversation today. There were multiple moments in this episode where I had to mute myself and yell at my children while they were doing their homeschooling upstairs. And so I appreciate your ability to just keep going. That is like mom to mom. Those are some high skills for you to just keep talking while I'm yelling in the background.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks so much for spending time with me today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And here's the thing. The reality is my kids are downstairs doing the exact same thing. And this is the other part of the equation is we need to be able to do this for one another more often and unfazed, right? Unfazed and supportive. So I really enjoyed our chat today too.
Awesome. Thanks, Jenn.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of Women's Health Unplugged. My goal is to help you feel more confident about your health. Please remember that what we talked about today in the podcast does not constitute medical advice, nor was a doctor-patient relationship formed. If you have questions about your healthcare or about how today's topic pertains to you, please take it up with your family doctor, your specialist, or someone on your health team.